Hello, Berean Church. My name is Darin Jost, and I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about getting back to normal. Now, I know it's been a couple months since we were able to have normal church, and if you're like me at all, you've kind of gotten used to it. I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember the last time I went to church in my pajama pants, but it happened recently, and I can't remember the last time I stopped Rick from singing mid-sentence just so I could go get a refill of coffee. So I've kind of become a little bit accustomed to this quarantine. Nonetheless, there are some important things we need to get back in the habit of, and some important things we need to start doing. And the first of which is we need to meet. We need to be together. And church is not just a social place where we talk to people and get interaction, although there is value to that. But it serves three really primary functions. When we meet, when we get together, that's where we learn. All throughout the Old Testament, we see prophets and priests who serve and teach at the temple. During Christ's ministry, he himself would go into whatever temple he came to and teach there. We know that as a child, he spent multiple days at the temple meeting with the teachers and learning about the law. So much so that his parents forgot him and had to come back and search for him. During his missionary journeys, almost every time Paul stops in a new city, he goes directly to the temple and he starts teaching there. And on the rare occurrence that he's able to stay for months or even years in a certain place, he teaches up to 2 times a day at the temple. And we know that the physical church, this building and these bricks, is not the same thing as Christ's church. It's still an important place and an epicenter of sanctification and learning. So the first thing we need to get back to doing is meeting together and learning. The second thing that the church does, that meeting helps us do, is worship. We know that worship is supposed to be a daily action. It's something that Scripture directs us to do without ceasing throughout the day. But the reality is that most of us worship best. Most of us worship most often in a church meeting. Ephesians 5:19 says, "Be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing, making music from your heart to the Lord." This is something that it says, speaking to one another, doing these things with one another. We need to be getting together again and meeting and worshiping. And finally, we know that the church, the meetings, are a place to serve. Galatians 5:13 says, "For you were called to be free, brothers, only don't use this freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but serve one another through love." Again, we have this one another passage where we're directed to serve in a group. The meeting together is the best place to start pursuing that. So often, I only know a person's need because I saw them out in the foyer at church, or because I was talking to them after the service and they said, "Yeah, I'm really going through a hard time." And to serve one another, we must be together. And if these things kind of seem like a stretch, like, I don't know if we need that nowadays, Hebrews 10:25 straight up says, "Don't forsake meeting together as some are in the habit of doing." So there's a scriptural imperative. This is something we need to be doing. Now, even if you cannot be here physically, please participate in our live streams. We have chat rooms. I myself am often in the chat room, and if there are questions, if there are needs that you have, we have specific people who are identified as hosts. If you need a prayer request or something like that, we are absolutely available to try and serve that need of service and worship together. We're going to be, at least last week we had an FM transmitter, and we were transmitting on radio signals, so you can even stay in the parking lot, somewhat isolated, but you can still come to the meeting together. Sam Albury, in one of his books, says part of drawing toward God involves drawing together. So do not forsake meeting. The second thing that we can do that helps us sort of get back to normal, or another post-quarantine skill we need to foster, is greeting. And this may seem contradictory or contrary to social distancing, but greeting is important. When done properly, it starts off an interaction humbly and selflessly. And we see this again time and time in Scripture. Christ, when he was divvying up his disciples and sending them out two by two, and he was giving them instructions, he told them to greet whatever house that they were staying in and stay there for the duration of their time in the city. The epistles are full of greetings. By my personal count, I found 9 books in the New Testament that either open or close with a greeting, a very specific greeting to a person from a person. And many of them have both at the beginning and end. And again, scripturally speaking, Romans 16:16, 1 Corinthians 16:20, 2 Corinthians 13:12, and 1 Peter 5:14 all compel us to greet one another. And the goal is not simply to say, hi, how you doing, cool, and move on. The goal is to make sure that the other person knows that you care, to find out what they care about, and really invest in that person individually. And the third thing we can do, we've gone through meet, we've gone through greet, and now we've got to come to not only a third thing, but something else that rhymes. We need to eat. Hospitality is a fundamental mechanic of Christian community. It's an excellent way to invest in others and reconnect after a long time apart. Lacey and I, my wife and I, had a family over just a day or so after this whole stay-at-home thing was lifted, and it was hilarious because without even intending to, we had a main dish and about 3 or 4 different sides that we came up with, just like, oh hey, let's add this. I went to a grocery store and I walked out with 4 different kinds of soda, and Lacey made iced tea. It was completely over the top, and it's simply, we were excited to be around fellow believers and have our kids get together. We were so encouraged by the entire thing to just sit down and spend time. And this is a core fundamental of how we relate to each other, not only as humans, but as fellow Christians. It's a great way to show somebody else that you love and care about them. Hebrews 13:1 and 2 say, let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality. 1 Peter 4:8 and 9 say, above all, maintain an intense love for each other, since love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaining. This is something that is extremely important. And Alex Straw, in one of his books, says, through the ministry of hospitality, we share our most prized possessions. We share our family, our home, our finances, our food, our privacy, our time. Indeed, we share our very lives. And I realize there are many that are rightfully concerned about avoiding sickness and will continue to be concerned in the coming months. But there are options available. This entire time, our governor has encouraged us to get takeout food, to continue going to restaurants and curbside pickup. In pursuit of hospitality, consider picking up a meal for somebody else and meeting at a park, at an open space where you don't necessarily have to worry about communicable diseases. Consider having a cookout in your backyard like we did. There are many, many options, and we've had a lot of time to sit and think and come up with creative solutions. So again, just to review, we need to meet together. If you cannot be here physically, please meet together online. There are options that the church is considering for separate services, whether that's 2 different times or simulcasting in the sanctuary and then at the same time over in the fellowship hall. Be open to these kinds of things, and if you are concerned, be creative with how you can address those concerns or express to an elder or a deacon ideas you might have that would be beneficial for the entire body. Second, we need to greet one another. We need to get back in contact. We need to start investing again in those relationships and having those opening comments to find out what you care about and what's going on in your life, and humbly sharing what's going on and what we're struggling with in our lives. And finally, we need to get together and we need to greet each other and eat. We need to break bread, as we see so often in Scripture. In conclusion, we know that Paul could not always be with his churches, but that did not keep him from ministering to the people he cared for and loved. He continued to meet with them in whatever way he possibly could. His letters were full of greeting, and time again we see him eating with them as often as he could. He wrote letters that he wrote letters when he could not be present and worshiped with them in prayer, and so should we. This was just a brief overview of a couple different things and a couple different ways you can pursue God. If you want to learn more, consider some of these books. First, I've already quoted, is Sam Alberry's Why Bother with Church. I got it and read it during the quarantine. It was very timely and very helpful. Second, Alex Strott's Hospitality Commandments. Great book. And again, I use the word book very, very loosely. Look at these things. They're glorified pamphlets. I mean, they're only a little bit bigger than tracts, so nothing intimidating. And finally, building up one another. If you don't have this book already, many of us went through it a couple years ago when the entire congregation went through it. But if you need one of these, I would suggest you come find me at church. We can say hi. Odds are I've forgotten these at home, so we might have to do lunch at my house, and we can talk about these things and really invest in each other. So thank you for spending some time to listen, and please reach out if you have any other comments or questions. Thank you.